Alright, Shalom. First of all, I'd like to start by giving all praises due to Yahweh, Ba'Hashem Yahawashi, Ba'Hashem Rakah Kodash, and double honors to the apostles and elders of GreatMillStone, and salutations to the Arkim doing his work in sincerity and in truth. My name is Amarth Kwam. Today, this video is going to be entitled Instex, a blow to US sanctions. Alright, some of the speaking points that I would like to mention is that we're going to be talking about how the US is losing its authority, and I'll explain what a PSV is in a moment. Also, how that the European Union or the European nations or US allies are in agreement with Iran, and how this hurts US relations. Another point I'd like to mention is that necessary action or force will be used by the US at some point based upon analyzing these articles which you now see on the screen. So first, before I explain what a SPV is, what you've seen in the news recently, all right, is a lot of allies or European allies of the US are basically, turning their nose up at the US, so to speak, on their pride and their attitude and dominance over them. All right, they're no longer allowing America to dictate their leadership and how they make decisions. All right, and this is one step towards the division between their allies and the US. Okay, so now I'm going to explain what the PSV is, and then we're going to get into these articles. So this is on Investopedia, a special purpose vehicle. It's an entity, is a bankruptcy remote entity that a parent company uses to isolate or securitize assets, and it often holds these off-balance sheet. Some also call this a bankruptcy remote entity or a variable interest entities, since its operations are limited to a acquisition and financing of specific assets as a method of isolating risk. A special purpose vehicle entity is a subsidiary company with an asset liability structure and legal status that makes its obligations secure. All right, so in a nutshell, this special purpose vehicle is a way that these other nations, these European nations, are doing business with countries that have sanctions, all right, against the approval of the US. All right, so now let's look at this another article in Lawfare, blog.com. You can see the date is March the 6th, 2019. It says Instex, a blow to the US sanctions. All right, in January 2019, France, Germany, and Britain announced the creation of a new payment processing system designed to keep alive the Joint Comprehension Plan of Action. All right, also known as the Iran deal, the instrument in support of trade exchanges. All right, that's Instex, is a European government-controlled special purpose vehicle, a legal entity created specifically to allow companies based in the European Union and in the future potentially elsewhere to continue and to engage in business with Iran without running afoul of US sanctions. You see, like we discussed. All right, so you can see that, these named nations are all using this SPV as a vehicle to continue to do business with countries such, namely as Iran, to undermine the US and their authority, Like, who the hell is the US, and who are they to tell us how to run our countries, man? And this is all fuel for fire. You know, where there's fire, there's smoke. Where there's smoke, there's fire, man. And you know, Esau ain't liking it over there, man. Trump ain't liking it. You know, and it makes America look bad. So America's gonna have to retaliate to these European nations. All right, so we can look forward to that retaliation being necessary action or force, which will be used, and we look forward to that action being that it would lead up to World War III. All right, I'm gonna read a little bit more and I'm gonna move on. It says, when President Trump withdrew from the JCPOA in May 2018, the United States not only reimposed on Iran the sanctions that existed prior to the agreement, but also added new sanctions. All right, let me scan through this article. It says previously sanctioned and more than 50 Iranian banks and their foreign subsidiaries, European countries were incensed and began to openly discuss ways to help companies circumvent US sanctions. So they're not interested in what the US has to say anymore, man. They're like, look, we don't trust you, US, man. You know, they had these countries on a spoon feed and dictating who they can do business with and how their economy can benefit. Well, they're like, to hell with the US, man. We're gonna make decisions for our own economy, because lest we do what America says and stabs us in the back. Okay, so it says European countries were incensed and began to openly discuss ways to help companies circumvent US sanctions and thereby preserve the deal. The result was Instex. All right, so you brothers can look that up. So from here, let me go to my next article. This is from DW.com. Which pretty much says the same thing. Instex Europe sets up transactions channel with Iran. You know, it names the countries, and it also names the UK, and the UK have set up a payment channel with Iran called Instex to help continue trade and circumvent sanctions from the US. Here's another point to note. Washington has cautioned EU nations, all right, against such actions. All right, so the US has voiced it's pissed. All right, and for them to have said that, it means that they're thinking about or have in place a plan of action. And, you know, we hope for that to become physical in the near future, man. All right. Let's look at scanning over this article again. Let's okay, so let's move on, man. All right, you know, the point's pretty much been made. In order for a sanction to work, people would have to comply. All right, other nations would have to comply, especially those allied inferior nations. They would have to comply, either by agreement or by fear. All right, just like you've got what's going on over there in Venezuela. Okay, you got the sanctions going on Venezuela, on Maduro. At the end of the day, it depends on if the surrounding nations are going to comply with those sanctions or continue to do business with them. All right? Now let's look at the definition of a sanction. So basically, Esau's losing his ability to dominate. And it's embarrassing him to these lesser nations to make them feel like they are able to resist him and you know, basically be released from his agreements, to basically show no respect towards America. Right? It makes America look weak. Anyway, let's look at the definition of sanction. A sanction, a threatened penalty or for disobeying a law or a rule, official permission or approval for an action, number 2, it says impose a sanction or penalty on, punish, discipline someone. All right, let's look at some of these synonyms for sanction. It says authority. All right, if you can't sanction someone, you're not an authority, which is obviously being demonstrated in resistance by these European nations. Yeah, that's it all. That's all I wanted on that, man. All right. Now from here, I wanted to go to this next article, which is also current news. It says Bolton threatens sanctions against foreign banks over ties to Maduro. And what that means is that these top elite bankers are being threatened with sanctions against these basically over ties to Maduro. But at the end of the day, they're resisting. They could resist and follow suit of what's happening in the previous articles mentioned. All right, people are starting to rise up against these elites of the West. All right, and starting to say, you know what, to hell with America, man. We do what we want. All right, we say who's in power concerning Maduro and this other guy, and we decide on who we're gonna do business with, and they're not gonna allow the U.S. to dictate or bully them anymore. So we can see a straight division amongst Satan right now, which dictates their fall. Okay, so now we've read the articles, I'd like to go to just a couple of scriptures. The first scripture on Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 7. It says, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee. You see? So for a long time, these nations were subject to America and also, obeyed America's narrative and agenda. But right now, they're fed up with America and they say, look, man, we're going to do our own thing. And, America's gobsmacked with their mouth wide open, saying this wasn't a part of the plan. All right, so they were at peace with them, at peace with America, but they've done things against America's will and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. Yeah, because America's been doing business with them, and America's been feeding these nations, all right, from these spoils and, taking over these different nations and, breaking bread, so to speak, spoon feeding these other nations. Every time they go to war, they sell the spoil or so forth. They share in the profits made, all right, or so-called share. Thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. All right, so Esau's at a point where, his so-called friends ain't his friends anymore, to put it simply. Nations are starting to turn on Esau, and Esau's finding himself in deep waters. We're going to see if he can swim. Now this is Isaiah 33:1. Woe to thee that spoilest, and thou was not spoiled, and dealest treacherously. All right, Esau, America has done them, has gone to different countries and nations, and took out their leaders or their leadership, and basically put in puppet leaders, and they're trying to do the same thing with Venezuela right now. All right, and trying to overthrow those leaders, and some successful, some unsuccessful. Namely, when Russia intervened in their most, about last year and a few years. All right, Esau's been always trying to, America's always been trying to take over certain nations, and some he prospered, and some he didn't. All right, but now even his allies are turning against him. And they dealt not treacherously with thee. When thou shalt cease to spoil, right, taking over the wealth of these other nations that you've conquered, thou shalt be spoiled. All right, now you're not getting the wealth that you wish you was gonna receive. All right, now what you call yours is now being controlled by your other allies, man. And when thou shalt make an end to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. All right, so they're going to stab you in the back, and that's exactly what's happening in these articles. Now, let's go to Revelation 17. And I'll read the second verse and jump up. It says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. All right. At one point, these nations were in bed with America, fulfilling the will of America, going to these wars, killing these people, taking their wealth, all right, and controlling their economy for their own benefits, all right, and getting these nations into debt. They was all into what the world calls democracy. And they employed it in their own countries, and they were happy with the results for a while, that honeymoon period with America. But then once they pulled the curtain open, they realized that they were just drunk, man. All right, it was lust, and what they had done to themselves is really destroyed themselves by embracing the West and their customs, and they only destroyed their economies, got them into debt, and destroyed their people, economically and socially. All right, domestically. All right, and they were better off following their own customs and leading their own country. All right. It says, and the inhabitants thereof, the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Now let's jump up to verse 16. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, the 10 horns representing NATO and the EU, 10 horns and sawest upon the beast, EU, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization that deals with security, world security issues and so forth, and threats, collection of nations. It says, and the 10, which is headed by America, by the way, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. So the European nations are going to hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Yeah. So they're gonna basically resist America, and America's gonna be like, I'm gonna F you up, so to speak, and then these nations are gonna retaliate. All right, and that retaliation is gonna be what we call prophecy of World War III, that all nations are gonna be involved in full-fledged war, and those that were allied with America are going to turn against America, and America is going to be destroyed, according to prophecy. All right. It says, "These shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire." And that's that intercontinental ballistic missile and all these different S-300 systems, and even was it India, if I'm not mistaken, they're renting or borrowing submarines and so forth, man, nuclear submarines and all sorts of weaponry inventions to destroy the enemy, which is America, man. All right, in the defense of their people. All right, which is only to this kingdom's destruction, for the Lord to bring forth the kingdom of heaven, man, which is the rulership of Israel. All right, headed by Yahweh, by Hashem Yahawashi, the Heavenly Father and His Son, you know, and so forth. So this kingdom's on its way out, and you know, these articles, I just wanted to bring them out to evidence what the scriptures say, you know. So anyway, with that, we're almost out of here, brothers. Until the next video, I'm going to say shalom.